Hello, everyone. Welcome to Behind the Headlines. It is April 15th, 2018, and I am Harrison Koehli. Joining me today, as usual, are Joe Quinn and Neil Bradley.
Hi there.
Hi, everyone.
And today we're going to be talking about the events of this weekend, the strike on Syria. So, in case you haven't heard, just like last year, 1 year ago, the United States, in concert with France and the UK, have launched a missile attack on Syria. Now, this has been kind of expected, or at least kind of telegraphed by Trump and the American administration for the past week or so, or more, since April 7th and 8th. That is when supposedly a chemical attack took place in Douma, near Damascus, well, in Damascus in Syria. So if we go over the timeline a bit, just briefly, we'll get into the details later. Before April 7th, when this attack allegedly took place, about a month beforehand, and at several times since then, and even in the months before, the Russians and as well as the Syrians have been saying that they expect essentially a false flag to take place, where the rebels in this region of East Ghouta would stage a chemical attack to basically call in U.S. air support, because that's what happened a year ago. And it happened. So on Friday night, our time, which was at like 4 in the morning Syria time, France, the UK, and the US, FUKUS, as we're lovingly referring to them.
Say it properly, Harrison.
FUKUS.
Close.
Focus.
Slower.
Carry on.
That's as close as I'm going to get. Launched over 100 missiles at what they say were three targets. A kind of what they allege was a chemical weapons kind of research laboratory, like research and development facility, basically a storehouse or a warehouse storing chemical weapons precursors, and another facility. And according to the Americans, it was a complete success. As Trump put it, how did he put it? Something like a perfect strike or something like that. All the missiles hit these three targets. None of them missed. None of them were shot down. The Syrian air defense utterly failed. And
The clown
mission
said,
accomplished.
Mission accomplished.
Mission
what was he thinking? He tweeted that, so it wasn't like, said in a hurry. He thought about it and said, I'm going to use W's dumb mission accomplished statement for this. He's
and
a
then
clown.
today he backed it up. He said he replied on Twitter, because everyone's criticizing him for saying mission accomplished. So on Twitter, I don't have it open right now, but he basically said, "Oh, well, I knew that everyone was going to hassle me for saying mission accomplished, but it's a great term and we need to use it more often." So he's sticking by his mission accomplished. But anyways, that's what the Americans say. The Russians, that day, in the afternoon, essentially afternoon and evening, the Ministry of Defense had a little press briefing where they gave a rundown of the situation, saying, according to them, the FUKUS targeted basically, I think, like 8 or 9 places, including various airfields, like military air bases, basically. The Russians.
Yeah.
The Russian Ministry of Defense. And so they gave a list of I think it was around 9 places that were targeted, and gave a rundown of how many missiles were fired at each target and how many were either diverted or taken out by the air defense system. And so according to the Russians, out of, I think it was 103 or 105 missiles fired, they intercepted like 71 or something like that. So about 30 odd missiles got through. So the just to compare that, the Americans say they only targeted 3 sites. The Russians say targeted 9 or so, and that missiles got through to 3 of them. So, for example, the Russians said that the Americans launched 12 cruise missiles at the Douma, I believe that's the name of it, Douma Air Base in Damascus, and that all 12 of those cruise missiles were diverted or shot down. Now there is, whenever something like this happens, there's all kinds of sources saying stuff. A lot of people say they have contacts in the Syrian military, and a lot of people do. But it's hard to parse, how many of these sources are accurate. But in the day or two after the strike, many people, Syrian sources, were saying that a lot of the missiles were shot down with the air defense systems, and that others were diverted using jamming technology. And of course, they were saying, "Oh, we won't say whose technology it was." Well, obviously, they're hinting that it was the Russians, because the Russians basically stood down in the days beforehand. They sent all their, or a lot, either all or most of their ships that were based in Tartus. They sent them for drills along the coast, basically evacuated that area, and apparently, well, allegedly, kind of pulled their guys out of certain areas, and right before, or let's say at some time before the attack, because the Russians were in contact with the Americans at this whole time. They somehow, either the Americans told them directly, or through there's some people saying it was through France, that the Russians were warned which targets exactly were going to be struck. So of course that gave the Russians and the Syrians time to evacuate those areas, and to move a lot of the Syrians more valuable weaponry, like their high-end jets and the things they have, out of the way and into safety. And so there was time to coordinate that kind of response. And so, like I said, there's a lot of buzz going around that while the Russians may not have or didn't, we know they didn't activate any of their air defense systems, because the missiles weren't directly targeting any Russian forces or Russian the Russian bases or military technology. They did, they might have used their jamming technology to divert some of these cruise missiles. And the Syrians say that there are no casualties, only 3 people were injured. And from what I've heard about those injuries, those were from missiles that were diverted and landed near residential areas, and those were shrapnel wounds. So that's just a basic rundown of what happened. Do you have any comments on that?
That's the basic rundown. Okay, they're the details. But let's just frame this for a second here.
Yeah.
Last week, the planet basically was on the verge of total Armageddon. Okay, I know few of our listeners will actually believe that to be the case, but the rhetoric last week was such that plenty of seasoned analysts, serious people who write about geopolitics and world events all the time, were telling their followers, their readers, their listeners, that they were not sure that they were going to wake up for a couple of mornings there last week, because they thought we were on the verge of nuclear Armageddon.
Mm-hmm.
People who watched all this happen during the Cold War, and they study it for a living. I mean, they're academics. Say they, in this current climate, have never seen anything as tense as this, at least as far as the rhetoric is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And what started this off? It was that alleged chemical attack in Douma last week. I think it's up to Saturday night, April 7th.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were off. It was a rerun of claims, but this time it was the rhetoric. They said it'd never been. People were saying, well, they'd never seen anything like this, but there was a similarity, obviously, with what happened last year, alleged chemical attack. Trump tweets something. Oh, that's sick. The U.S. launches airstrikes against Shayrat Air Base. There was that. It was also very close to the situation we had in 2013. Another alleged chemical attack, also in Ghouta.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. and other NATO forces were weapons hot, planes on the runway, ready for takeoff, apparently, and then suddenly they backed down.
Mm-hmm.
The British had a vote in Parliament, and we've voted not to go to war, and it looked like democracy actually functioned in Britain for the first time. But that was an illusion, of course. But whatever. That's how close things got last week in terms of, at least at the level of the rhetoric.
Mhm.
And everyone held their breath. What's going to happen? Is the US seriously going to blow up Syria?
Mm-hmm.
What will Russia do? And then in the end, we got this strange, muted event that...
Well, it was, yeah. I mean, it was obvious to us anyway that was what was going to happen. In fact, you know, I was posting about it on Facebook 5 days on when Trump first talked about his nice new shiny missiles and stuff. When they first mooted the idea that they were going to launch some kind of an attack because of the chemical weapons, supposed chemical weapons attack, which is complete and utter nonsense. Everybody understands that at this point. I hope understands that how transparent transparently false that claim is. There's no evidence, basically. I mean, put it this way: you know, when something happens, when there's some claim that some crime has been committed, and then the person who feels aggrieved says, "Okay, we're going to get someone in there and investigate who did this," but before, or say the international community says that we're going to get someone in and try and find out who did this bad thing against you, and before they can get anybody in, the person who claims they were they're the victim of this jumps in and starts kicking people, you know, indiscriminately slapping people or beating people up, whatever. It's like, you know, are you sure, you know, that you're honest here and in your claims? That this is someone who makes a claim that I was aggressed and I know who did it. Okay, well, let's investigate. No, shut up. I know who it was. I'm going to get in there and kick the crap out of that person. It's like, but hang on, there isn't really any evidence that person did this to you. Shut up, I'm going to get them. I mean, it's such a false, obviously false narrative and like a preformed agenda, a preformed plan to do something that it's amazing. And what dismays me the most about all this is the fact that people, the average person, I don't know how many there are, and again, it actually frustrates me that I can't tell how many people are actually buying this nonsense, but I'm assuming that a certain number of people are buying the nonsense, and it blows my mind that anybody would buy this. We're not even in the realm of kind of like murky, yeah, you can't really know what's going on. It's so obvious by the behavior of the British government and the American government in particular over the past month since the Skripal business leading, which is all of a piece basically with this chemical weapons attack. Well, I mean, Skripal was supposedly a victim of chemical weapons, and then suddenly you have chemical weapons in Syria. And what ties the two together is Russia, right? But since the Skripal business, which is now what 6 weeks old, the way the British government and the American government have conducted themselves should leave no one in any doubt that these people are full of it. They have an agenda. They're making up accusations against other people to justify a preformed plan that they have, and we know what that preformed plan is. They want to get rid of Assad. They want to change the situation in Syria. So yeah, it's pretty amazing, and I don't know what to do. I don't know.
Theresa May expressly justified Britain's participation in the airstrikes against Syria as saying it was to deter chemical attacks in Syria and the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
So they have she without saying Russia, she basically stitched in the Skripal affair.
Somehow a chemical attack in Syria is going to transform into some kind of a chemical attack on the UK by Assad or something. Are we back at Saddam Hussein's 45 minutes? Hang on a minute.
Kind of.
Does Bashar al-Assad have a weapon with a chemical warhead that he could launch in 45 minutes that would strike the UK and wipe out millions of people?
No,
is that true?
No, but Russia did.
Shit.
Russia does, you see? Because
Russia
poisoned Skripal, and Trump accused Russia of being behind the Douma chemical attack in Syria.
Right.
So Russia is the connecting factor between the two. That's why
Russia might attack the UK with chemical weapons.
That's how the UK is able to posture itself in a formal official statement as saying we attack Syria in self-defense. You see, that's the angle. That's how they're angling that in there.
It's a bit vague though for me.
It's extremely vague, but it flies with some people because they see the world as one great big danger
It's an
zone,
appeal
and
to
I'm here
emotion.
in my safe space, and everything else is a
Yeah.
threat.
It's an
And
appeal to emotion, and particularly to authoritarian follower types who want the government to save them from anything. People who
yeah,
have a tendency to easily crap their emotional pants.
and to fundamentally, in the root of their being, believe that the whole world is out to get them,
Especially Putin.
especially Putin. He'll do, but Assad will do too. Saddam,
There's only one.
Gaddafi, etc.
There's only one group that thinks the whole world's out to get them.
Well, they have it strongest, but I think the
Uh,
syndrome can be found elsewhere. It can be found among, especially among liberal types in Western cities. They really like that's what that's why that's the constituency that eats this stuff up.
they think the world is out to get them, or bad people are out to get them, or there's bad stuff in the world that needs
They
to
will
be
eat up this
stopped.
propaganda. They will believe that Putin, Assad, Gaddafi before them, threatened their lives in their safe spaces back home. That's why we need to go over. Yeah. Let's go bomb them.
That's why you have the anti-war party, the traditional anti-war party, effectively being the most vocal in its support for bombing other countries. Effectively, which is what has
Effectively,
happened. Which is
yeah.
what has happened. Yeah. Yeah. But back to the back to the Douma thing. This was, I mean, if you read, I just published an article on salt.net. There's a nice picture of Trump at the top, and it's about it's mainly about the claim that all of these missiles, 104, 103, 105, 118, there's different sources, but I think the Americans said less than 120 or something. There's various different numbers, but it's over 100 anyway. Over 100 Tomahawk and other type of cruise missiles fired from planes, etc., were fired in the morning at about 4 o'clock in the morning from the Red Sea and in the Mediterranean, fired at Syria. According to the it should be noted that I mean I'm not sure everybody knows this. I know Harrison, you said at the beginning that Russia said they targeted about 8 or 9 different sites, but officially, according to Lieutenant General Kenneth F. McKenzie, who told reporters yesterday that and this was also backed up by the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Joseph Dunford. Both of them confirmed that only 3 targets were hit and planned to be hit in the first place. Only 3. And those 3 targets were basically a university, a research institute, an institute of higher learning. It's actually called it's outside Damascus. It's called the Higher Institute of Applied Science and Technology. It's well known. It's been around there for since 1983. It was founded. It basically is a technical college, university. There's undergraduate and postgraduate degrees in engineering and math and algebra, well, different, basically sciences and research and development and stuff. And it's in a campus just on the outskirts of Damascus, right beside the Basra suburb, which itself has about 50,000 people, and this is right on the very edge of it. It's a few acres, several buildings on this campus, and that was one of the targets. 3 buildings on that campus. They basically destroyed them. The other 2 sites of the 3 that they targeted, and these are the only ones that they targeted according to the Americans, were outside Homs, to the west of Homs, along the highway, just off the highway, again in like around little villages around there, a few thousand people and stuff in little villages around there, in the countryside basically. A few little buildings, like 2 little cow sheds basically, that look like size of cow shed type things, and one that's even smaller. So outside Damascus, they blew up 3 buildings in the university. Outside Homs, they blew up couple of cow sheds and tried to blow up another thing that looks more like a chicken shed, maybe. But they missed that one. If you look at the satellite pictures, because I'm not joking here, the US government released to the media satellite images of these sites before and after. And you can see if you look at the article, you can see before and after images. On the 3rd one, they actually missed it completely. There's only one evidence of one impact site, and it missed the little building that's right there. And I'm talking about really like a cowshed sized place. The other place, a couple of the little buildings were destroyed, and then in the university campus, 3 kind of buildings which were part of this Institute of Technology, they were destroyed. And there's video you can see of the rubble of that, people on Sputnik and RT and stuff, and there's the Syrian government is people have been there. Chinese TV has been there. There's Chinese people there. But the interesting thing in the videos is that they're all walking around in these buildings in this university that have been destroyed. They're walking around close to them. There's loads of people all going around. There's Chinese reporters that are talking about them and saying, "Hey, look at this, look at that, look, the building has collapsed and stuff." And according to America, this was a chemical weapons storage site, development and storage site, right beside the outskirts of Damascus, where the 50,000 people just a few hundred meters away. So, one thing you haven't heard in the media, all three of these sites, which were in populated areas, close to populated areas, were all, according to the Americans, storage or production sites for chemical weapons, including sarin. And they blew the crap out of them, or tried to blow the crap out of them, at least in one case, and didn't do it. So not one member of the mainstream media, as far as I'm aware, has raised the question of, is that not a bit dangerous? I mean, you say this is a sarin storage site, stockage, depot for sarin chemical weapons, and you fired chemical weapons or missiles at it beside populated area. What were you going to say, Harrison?
Well, actually, at least one mainstream source did bring it up. The Pentagon did a press conference yesterday,
right?
And one of the questions asked was about this, and basically saying, well, if you're targeting these chemical weapons facilities, isn't there a chance that would be dangerous because it would release all these chemicals? And the response was pretty funny. They basically said, well, our military guys are really smart, and they took that into account, and all we can say is that we're sure that it won't have any effect, and you'll be able to tell after the fact when there are no reports of any
Right.
chemicals being dispersed.
So either your tech guys, your military tech guys, are so smart they know they can blow up a chemical weapons site, and somehow the missile will have magical powers where it will prevent the dispersal of the chemical weapons at that site. Or the other possible explanation is that there were none there.
Mm-hmm.
Which one is it? Anybody take your pick. Which is it? Which is most likely to be? Let's use Occam's razor here. The US government knows that they can blow up a chemical weapons site with a cruise missile and it will not affect the people who are living right beside it. Or there are none there. Send your votes in on that one, folks, to sat.net, and we'll release the results later on.
Now that we've
difficult
busted that wide open, I know what they'll come back with. Well, those sites didn't quite have chemical weapons. They had the precursors.
No, but they've said that they were storage sites.
They've said outright storage.
Oh, yes.
The one
east of Homs were bunkers and depots.
See, I'm trying to give them an out here, and
so the other thing that this brings up, when you look at the details, look at the images of the Institute of Technology outside Damascus that they blew up 3 buildings in that campus. You look at the size of it, and you say, okay, there are 3 buildings, not very big buildings, several stories high, but just a small part of the few acre site and 3 buildings on it. And you think to yourself, how many cruise missiles would it take to blow up those 3 buildings? And you can look at some videos of cruise missiles. I mean, a Tomahawk cruise missile, a standard cruise missile has 500 kilos, carries 500 kilos of explosives, i.e. about 1,000 pounds. 1,000 pounds of explosives. Then you can look at 1,000-pound bombs being detonated, and you can get a rough estimate. There's one video that I included in the article from Afghanistan, where the US military is whooping and cheering over dropping 9 1,000-pound bombs on a kind of compound that is, based on my estimation, is actually significantly larger than the place in Damascus, the campus in Damascus, larger than the area of those 3 buildings. And these 9 1,000-pound bombs completely obliterated, right? Totally destroyed. And this is a good bit bigger than what was hit in Damascus in the campus. So, but the problem then comes up is that General Dunford and all the bigwigs in America said they fired, in the Pentagon, said they fired 76 cruise missiles at those 3 buildings. Frankly, it's nonsense. But I mean, it's interesting though, because you would, if you allow for the video that from Afghanistan that shows 9 similar cruise missiles basically being, or similar bombs being detonated, you would say, okay, give them 9 for that. But it's an overestimation. But let's allow them 9. So 9 hit there, and these are the images they released themselves. There's no more images, no more sites talking about it. 3 sites, and you have images of the destruction at 3 sites, satellite images provided by the CIA or the US military of these 3 sites that show the destruction before and after. You can use the little slider and see before, after, and it shows you the damage done on 3 sites, only 3 sites targeted, but 100 plus cruise missiles fired. The good thing about the 2 sites of the 3 in Homs, west of Homs, is that you can see the craters on the ground, and you can count them. On one, there's about 5, and the other one is 1. The one that actually missed the tiny little cow shed. Okay, it was a chicken shed, but it was hard to hit. Like, I mean, you have to allow for some level of kind of like, you know, error basically when you're firing at something so small.
Even shiny new missiles, you know,
It was a bit off, right? But it didn't hit it. So there's 1 crater at that side, about 5 craters at the other side. These 2 sites outside Homs. So that's 6. There's also talk, and the Russian military talked about the airbase near just basically in Damascus called what's the name of it? Mezeh military airbase in Damascus, and there's a video from RT from Rupley that doesn't show any destruction, but says that this was hit, but you can't see any destruction, any impact sites at all. So let's throw in 10 for that. That's quite a lot, 10 cruise missiles, but we'll throw in 10 at that military base. So you've got 10 there, 5 at the site outside Homs, and 1 at the other side outside Homs. That's 16. And if we give 10 for the Institute of Technology, that's 25. That's 25 by their own evidence and by their own statements. There's no way you can possibly account for more than 25 or 30 missiles having hit anywhere in Syria.
And that matches what the Russians said. Like, I've got the MOD briefing up right now. I'll read it just to compare what you've been saying with what the Russians said. So they said 4 missiles targeted the Damascus International Airport, 12 missiles the Al Dumair airdrome. All missiles have been shot down.
Right.
18 missiles targeted the Bly airdrome. All missiles shot down. 12 missiles targeted the Shayrat air base. All missiles shot down. All bases were not affected by the strike. 5 out of 9 missiles were shot down targeting the unoccupied Mazeh airdrome. So that's the one you were talking about. So according to the Russians, 4 missiles got through to the Mazeh airdrome.
Okay.
13 out of 16 missiles were shot down targeting the Homs airdrome. There are no heavy destruction. So 3 missiles got through to Homs. And then, lastly, in total, 30 missiles targeted the facilities at Barza and Jaramana. 7 of them have been shot down. So they're saying that 23 weren't shot down. These facilities allegedly relating to the so-called Damascus military chemicals program were partially destroyed. However, the objects have not been used for a long time, so there are no people or equipment there. Now, so
They
basically
have not been used for a long
23.
time?
Yeah.
But
Well, and get this.
Go to Google
One
Maps and
sec.
look, or go to the website of the Institute of Technology outside Damascus, Barzeh district outside Damascus. What do you mean it hasn't been used for a long time? There are videos of people going in and out of it every day and going to classes in it. It's a university.
Yeah, I don't know what they're talking about, but
But listen, here the point is, yes, all of those were cited by Syrian or Russian authorities. All of those at various different places, air bases or airfields and all that kind of stuff that were targeted, and it amounts to maybe 10 different places or more. And they give the numbers of how many were shot down, et cetera, et cetera. But that just proves the point, basically, that or just exposed the lies, the further lies of the US government, in that look at it this way, they fire 100 plus cruise missiles. They know they're tracking them. They're their cruise missiles. They're guided by GPS. They're watching them. And in real time, if they were fired at 4 o'clock in the morning Syria time a couple of days ago, then at 5 o'clock in the morning, the US knew that a crap load of them were shot down. And it wasn't until 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning our time, about 6 hours after the attack actually happened, or 7 hours after the attack happened, that was the first media report. There was a 6 hour dead zone, basically, or
I wondered about that.
radio
There was
silence.
a lag.
Right.
Yeah.
And they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what. They had this period of time when they're saying, okay, listen, 70% more or less of our missiles just got shot down. Initially, we were going to release reports about all the locations that were targeted and were hit, but we can't do that now. We need a few hours to figure out what to say. And the first reports then came out and reduced what was going to be originally by the original plan based on the targeting of the 109 missiles of all those different places, of 10 or 12 places, including many airfields. That was reduced down to 3. The 3 places that they knew they actually hit with any significance. In fact, there was some of the missiles that hit, that Harrison mentioned, and that the Syrians say actually hit air bases, that weren't mentioned by weren't part of obviously the three targets that were hit by that were claimed by the US government. They weren't even sure. They knew they fired 10 at that or 9 at that airbase, but only 4 of them got through. So they were like, will we include that one? Yeah, no, let's leave that out.
There were meetings, frantic meetings.
We don't even know if they got there. What we do know, though, is a bunch of them hit the university.
So we'll highlight that.
So we'll highlight that, and we got to spin that as
we'll push extra. The excess airstrikes will push them over into accounting for that particular airstrike.
Right, but they can't, obviously. 76. Why? Because they said 76. I mean, yeah, your man said, what's his name? Lieutenant General
Mackenzie
said 76. Go look at it yourself. Look, it's called the Higher Institute of Applied Science and Technology outside of Damascus. It's been there since 1983. It's been giving people diplomas, graduate degrees, postgraduate degrees, undergraduate degrees in various sciences. It's a research and teaching institution. Go on Google Maps, look at it. It's at the back end of Damascus, away from the sea. You can see it. You can see the campus, and you can see clearly the 3 buildings that were destroyed. And then go look at the video you can look at it from China news, Russian news, Syrian news, wherever you want. It's on, all of them are on YouTube, and you can see the buildings that were kind of like collapsed and partially destroyed, and one of them completely destroyed. And then you tell me that 76 500 kilogram, 1,000 pound bombs hit that area, and go and do your research, whatever, on bombs and the effects they have. It's complete nonsense. But this guy had to come out yesterday, Saturday, so he had 2 days or day and a half to get his story straight. That's Dunford, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Lieutenant Colonel, whatever his name is, Mackenzie. They had to say that 76 of them hit those 3 buildings, which is complete nonsense. This is the level of BS.
It's incredible. They needed a massive lie to obviously do this in the first place, and having done it, it's still no victory for them. But they need to lie again to make it seem like one. It's incredible. Well, but what is the thing that they're having to cover up? It's that the Syrians shot down the majority of those shiny new smart, to quote the president, Tomahawk missiles, including 2 brand new types developed by Lockheed Martin. First time ever being used.
Right.
First time ever, brand new, shiny. Maybe they're probably the ones Trump was referring to. Shiny new, smarter missiles. Yeah. And they shot them down. Oh my God.
They shot down a bunch of them. I mean, seriously.
And they're covering this up. They're covering this up all over the place. There are videos. I mean, there are videos from Damascus. Obviously, people were either pre-positioned or they woke up and they filmed themselves of missiles being launched around the city. And I saw them, but they were first put up on Saturday. But now I'm seeing these same video footage being shared by the social media channels of mainstream outlets like AP and the Guardian, and they're reporting. They're putting headlines like, here's AP's headline of a clip of what is obviously a missile being launched from the ground into the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Raw footage, flares launched into skies above Damascus.
Flares.
Flares.
This is the level of bullshit that they're trying to feed people, you know. I don't know, is it that the media is just that retarded, or are they that cynical and that, you know, are they that duplicitous, you know? Or are they just so stupid that they've become such hacks? They've been spent so many years just repeating memos and briefs given to them by politicians that they have actually lost the ability or interest to actually think for themselves. I mean, someone who writes that, someone who looks at that video, what kind of an idiot does that? Looks at a video of a light in the sky during what is everybody understands to be an attack, a light from in the distance going up from the ground and disappearing into the sky, and calls that a flare. Who are they employing? Flares fall down. They appear first in the sky and they fall to Earth.
Well, apparently gravity is reversed for these people or something. The Guardians was no better. They have the similar headline. Amateur footage, the same one I've seen and shared myself. They say it shows missiles falling over Damascus as the airstrikes begin.
Right. But they're rising up from the ground.
They're not. They're being launched from the sky. It's obvious they're being launched from the ground upwards. Like, so it's so shameless. It's like you said, it's either shameless or they actually interpret reality that way. They're so inured to it that they will look at it and up is suddenly down. I don't know.
Their belief actually twists and distorts their vision, basically, and
Yeah.
so they see the opposite of what's actually happening.
They saw they watched the same event as the rest of us on Saturday when it was eventually reported after being put through clearance control at the Pentagon, whatever. And they went, "Oh, it's Baghdad shock and awe all over."
Mm-hmm. Right.
Some people actually, there's a couple of YouTube channels that are taking the footage, what they claim to be the footage. You know, they're posting videos and they're saying this is footage of Damascus being hit by the airstrikes on April 14, 2018, and it includes footage of shock and awe from 2003 and bombing by Kiev forces in eastern Ukraine in 2015.
So they're fully into the realm of fake news. Doing that basically. Did you say the Guardian did that?
No, the Guardian did that. Some Trump supporting channel, Trump Days or something like that.
Yahoo's. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think the fish is going to have to come out for the media big time. You know, it's not just politicians anymore, but fish slapping is necessary now for, you know, all of the media. And it would almost motivate me to get like a fake press pass, so I can get into one of those press conferences. And I wouldn't be targeting the person giving the press conference, a politician necessarily. I'd just be running around the room slapping the heads of every single member of the Western media, because, I mean, you can joke about it, but those people are dangerous.
Yeah,
extremely dangerous, because they are the interface between, you know, what's happening in the world at the level of politics and government that has direct effect on the people, and they're the interface between them. You know, they're kind of like the popes of the world, if you know what I mean, the popes of the media, basically, where they're the interface between God, the politicians, and the ordinary people. They interpret the word of God, basically, and these people are actually
less and less, thankfully.
Huh?
They are
hopefully
less and less,
but
now they're just an annoyance, an interference between basically people can just talk and work things out themselves.
Well, hopefully more people will do that, but I mean, they still have an extreme. I mean, maybe now that's happening, but my problem is that for decades they have poisoned the minds of people, of a whole generation of people, with lies and nonsense, and you know, refusing to do their job, the job that they were given to do, which is actually investigate, use their brains, and report what they find. They're basically just an arm of the government, and it's despicable. I mean, there's a special place in hell for those people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's the lies that are killing I mean, the lies eventually have real effects, like they kill people
Yeah.
in these war zones. But it's the lies that are killing us all.
Yeah.
It's toxic. They literally kill your soul, and these people just do it shamelessly.
Yep.
They have no soul. They want to eat everyone else's soul. I don't know. I mean, they just like they seem at this point they seem to revel in it. You know, where you've had so many opportunities to challenge your own beliefs. Let's say go
Mhm.
with it. Well, this is what they've always believed, and it's what they've always been told. But at this point, Russia has practically physically stepped into Syria, held up a giant freaking mirror for all the world to see,
Mhm.
shown so many ways that Al Qaeda is a Western creature.
Mhm.
This is another. I mean, the reason that they're doing this in Douma is because the Syrian forces and the Russians were on the verge of clearing it out. And
Right.
as they clear out each enclosure, they show videos of all the weapons that these terrorists have had all these years
All with
from Israel,
Western
Britain,
markings.
France, the US, and so on.
Mhm.
You know, practically made in the UK,
Yeah.
stamped all over them. So that's what I mean by the holding up the mirror. And the
Right.
evidence is just over freaking whelming now. Of
Right.
course,
So-
that's then spun by these people as an avalanche of Russian propaganda.
Right. So they're lying.
They're lying.
They're blatantly lying. And I mean, this chemical weapons narrative is complete nonsense, and they keep spewing it out over and over again. I mean, in this pusillanimous kind of like slimy way, where they'll just even the Guardian, the lefty Guardian newspapers and stuff, you know, that are supposed to be anti-war, or in the reports on this are parroting this bullshit line of chemical weapons, as if that's the reason why the U.S. has the biggest buildup of military ships in the Mediterranean off the coast of Syria and Lebanon since the 2003 Iraq invasion, when they invaded Iraq, right, with 200,000 troops or 100,000 troops. Since then, they have the biggest military buildup, and the Guardian, the anti-war Guardian, is going to try and convince everybody that it's because of some allegation by some people that 50 people were killed in a chemical weapons attack in Douma. That's how much America cares about Arabs. And all the American politicians and all the British politicians and all the French politicians care so much about Arabs in general, or the people of Syria, that they're willing to put like full military might onto the shores and prepare to invade the country and bomb the country back to the Stone Age to save some Arabs. This is what the media actually is trying to convince you is what's actually happening. And they don't give a shit about the obvious story that's behind it, the obvious truth that this is a geopolitical kind of a game that's been going on for a long time between Russia, and the US and its allies, that has been going on for 7 years, and the context of the Syrian conflict in general, which is that from day one, the US and the UK and France, FUKUS, have been lobbying for 7 or 8 years. Well, go back 7 or 8 years, and they were screaming at the top of their voices that Assad is a brutal dictator and he has to go. And then immediately after that round of screaming, the country gets invaded by a bunch of jihadi mercenaries who are using Western weapons. And the Guardian is going to tell us it's about it's about concern for the Syrian people. The upshot of them doing that, of them screaming for the beheading effectively of Assad, and then them flooding the country with the help of their Gulf state allies, Saudi Arabia, etc., to flood the country with 100,000 plus mercenaries with Western weapons. The upshot, the result of that over the past 7 years has been the death of 500,000 Syrian civilians that they are responsible for.
Yeah.
And today, the anti-war newspapers will tell us, or try and justify further bombing of Syria on the basis of the Western governments, on the basis of the idea that the Western governments care about the Syrian people, when they spent the last 7 years slaughtering 500,000 of them.
Mm-hmm. If there were Nuremberg trials for this crime, the Guardian, key Guardian personnel, editorial staff, and certain of their regular writers would be up as accomplices for war crimes.
Right.
Absolutely. They have no excuses. I was told to write it, won't be an excuse. While everyone else around me believed it, won't be an excuse. You wrote flagrant lies in the face of overwhelming opportunities to see,
To tell the truth.
to tell the truth, to
And see
find out for yourself.
Right. And help and try and save people's lives.
I didn't know. They could be blowing smoke here as well. But is that probably correct that it was the largest buildup yet of?
It is, yeah.
It was the
Along
largest
with,
buildup.
I mean, the aircraft carrier Truman, USS
Right.
Truman, is scheduled to arrive in the next day or two or whatever,
Well,
with 60 aircraft or something. I mean, what's going to happen there? We don't know, but that's something we can talk about. Actually, is after this 100+ cruise missile attack on nothing, basically nothing of any strategic value. Actually, you have to be specific about this. The 100+ cruise missile attack that was launched the other night on Syria was not against nothing. It was against strategic targets that Harrison mentioned earlier on several military bases,
Yeah.
etc. The reason it turned out to be insignificant was because 70% of the missiles were shot down. The question now is, and obviously America knows that. It's lying about it, obviously, because like I said in the article, it also lied through its teeth back in the first Gulf War about the success of Patriot missiles, talking about almost 100% success rate. Actually, it was 2. So America has a track record, it has past form of telling massive whopper lies about the performance of its missiles. So obviously it is doing the same again today based on all of the objective evidence. So the question is, now that it knows that, now that it got that shock, there was a bit of shock and awe the other night actually, but it was all in the Pentagon.
right.
They were shocked and awed
By Russian
by
capabilities.
not just
Although
by Syrian capabilities.
Syrian,
effectively.
officially Syrian.
Cold War 1970s anti-aircraft systems. Of course, there
this
was
is
probably
something we need to tease out here. On Saturday morning, the Russian MOD got to send the mother of all digs to the Pentagon by laying this out that 70% of them had been shot down, by Cold War era
Right.
technology. But we don't believe that, right? They probably wasn't. I mean, they could be older systems, but they've probably been upgraded, right?
Right.
Yeah,
but I
the
think
Russians
that-
have been upgrading the Syrian technology
Right.
for the last
Right.
couple of years now.
But that doesn't mean that they're not Cold War systems. A lot of them were Cold War systems. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
it's just about. I mean, obviously, technology hasn't advanced that much in the past 30 or 40 years in terms of the speed, let's say, of missiles, of the average missiles that you'd use. Like the Tomahawk cruise missile that was used has been in service for 20, 30 years, is still flying at the same speed as it did when it was first developed, at the same speed as a commercial airliner, about 500 miles an hour. So technology from that era that was designed to shoot it down, using the same kind of technology, same kind of rocket propulsion, etc. They can fly fast, and the difference maybe is in radar, the effectiveness of radar. So it's not so much that you need to have. The technology has evolved so much that you need to have super fast anti-missile defenses type of thing, because missiles have become super fast. They haven't really the standard missiles that they use. It's the effectiveness of a Cold War era anti-missile system can be upgraded, not by upgrading the system itself, but upgrading the radar that goes along with it in terms of targeting. So as long as you can actively target and track the incoming missiles, then a 1980s or late 1970s system or anti-aircraft or anti-missile system will be just fine.
So if we exclude last April's pre-run of this incident, where there were rumors that the Russians maybe jammed some of those 56 Tomahawks coming in off the Med, this represents the first successful defense against American aerial bombardment ever.
But only because America only picks countries that cannot defend themselves, that have not got a capability
But
to
Syria
defend themselves
could
effectively.
and they
But Syria
probably
could
knew
because
that.
of Russia. Over the past 2 years, Russia
Right.
has been upgrading, polishing off, shining up their defense that they had. But Syria arguably has had, even regardless of Russia, Syria has better better air defense system since since the Cold War era,
Right.
because of its association with the Soviet Union.
Okay.
The Soviet Union actually sold anti-aircraft and missile defense systems preferentially to Syria because of the relationship that they had.
Okay.
So, and that's part of the reason why Russia is actually in Syria now, because they have a long history of having a close relationship between the two countries. So, so basically, Syria already had a much more robust anti-aircraft or anti-missile system than, say, Iraq had in 2003 or Libya had in 2011, and that has been augmented over the past couple of years with Russia in the country by the Russian military, who have, like I said, given it a new coat of paint and etc. etc.
I have a question for Harrison. In hindsight, do you wonder if Trump's tweet last Wednesday, which was patently absurd on the face of it, in which he gloated directly to Putin, basically saying, "Watch out, Russia, we've got shiny new missiles and we're coming for Syria." Do you wonder if in hindsight there was a heads up to Russia?
Oh, well, I think so. For sure. Well, this is what I think has been going on, mostly just based on reading, little comments here and there from, people who seem to be in the know and just kind of using common sense as well. Of course, I could be wrong. Is that from the moment this whole this latest conflict started, like just in the past few weeks, that there has been conflict within the United States, kind of military establishment and the administration and the war hawks, and that this is, well, let's just kind of try to figure out what might have been going on. From reports, it seems that Secretary of Defense Mattis has actually been a voice of reason and was within the administration, that there were certain war hawks, and that this, according to some reports, even includes Trump, that Trump really wanted to go hard. Most likely Bolton too, who's now in there. There are some, commentators who have commentators on the Hill with sources that have basically said, yeah, for sure, Bolton was behind this 100%, as in supporting it, not necessarily as being the guy that started it, but that within the military, at least with Mattis, he was one of the sane voices of reason, saying, okay, no, we can't go big, we can't destroy all these targets, we can't, basically, we can't go to war with Russia. That would be stupid. The best thing to do would be to do nothing. But if we have to do something, it will be this cosmetic kind of symbolic strike, like last year. And so after the strike happened, a lot of these commentators were saying, well, it looks like Mattis kind of had an effect on the rest of the people in the administration. There are also reports that for the entire week, since that tweet, that the Russian and the American military were in constant contact, basically. So, so it looks like on both sides, well, at least on the American side, there was the perception that they needed to do something, that Trump needed to do something. Whether that's true or not is kind of irrelevant. If they think they need to do something, and if they, are seemingly on that path that they will be doing something, then they need to decide, okay, well, then what are we going to actually do? Well, that's when some coordination with the Russians can come into play, where it's like, okay, we're going to do something, like Trump tweeted, we have to do something, we're going to do something, so let's work something out here. Get your guys out of these locations, because we don't want to kill any Russians, and we know, that's kind of the red line in Syria for the Russians. So I don't know how, it's impossible to say how specific these conversations would have gotten, but
Yeah.
But by all indications, the Russians were told in advance when the strikes would happen, and presumably also some of the targets that would be targeted. Now, that might also explain some of the success rate for the anti-missile defense. Not to say that they wouldn't have been effective without, but with that extra information, knowing when they're going to be attacked and which bases are going to be attacked, that that data may have made the made the air defense that a bit more effective. One thing I wanted to ask you guys, Joe, particularly based on something you just said about the Syrian air defense, is that I read something in the past, I think it was yesterday, I think it was from Andrew Karibko, and he was talking about how he thinks that was the main reason that the air defense was so successful, is because they knew beforehand and had all this data beforehand, plus the advantage of the Russian involvement in their systems, that they can coordinate with the Syrian systems. But he said that Iraq had very similar systems, and some of the same technology back in 2003, and that they did put it into use when Iraq was bombed, basically, and attacked, total shock and awe, and that their systems weren't as effective as the Syrians were this time. So I just wanted to see what you thought about that, with a little bit added that there has been these last 2 years of upgrading the Syrian systems. So we have to take that into account.
I think that's an important part of it, and very non-negligible part of the effectiveness of the Syrian air defense, and also the fact that I don't think Iraq had been sold quite as many systems as Syria had. If you look at the kind of if you look at the history of Syria and the Syrian-Russian relationship, and even documented stuff you can find online of military weapons sales agreements between Syria and Russia, Syria seemed to get preferential treatment from the Soviet Union at the time. Certainly, the Soviet Union was selling them to various different countries, but Syria for some reason had a special place in the Soviet Union's heart.
I reckon
back
that's to
then.
do with Israel.
Yeah.
A check. It's the closest, biggest check on Israel.
There's been something I've been thinking about for, just during this show, because Joe, you mentioned that there was like a several-hour break in the news reports, but I didn't notice that here because it happened at 9 o'clock, like 9 p.m. our time, and we didn't hear about it until just after 10, and we turned on the TV when it was happening, and so we got the first on-air news reports. Just over an hour after the attack had happened. And in that first report, now I'm pretty sure I'm remembering this correctly. If not, then, in the chat room, anyone else that was watching can correct me. But I'm pretty sure in that first report at like 10:15, 10:20, that they'd said that the Pentagon had specified 3 targets. So they did mention the 3 targets, and only 3 targets, like just an hour after the attack.
Right, well,
but
maybe
they said
only
that,
needed an hour.
right. Well, exactly. That's what I was getting to, because what they said was they mentioned the research facility, and they mentioned one of the homes targets, and then they said, and a third target that will not be named yet. So they were leaving that one open. Basically, said the military wouldn't specify the third target.
They were hedging their bets, but the bottom line here is that since there's evidence of other air bases and airfields having been targeted, but the Pentagon and the U.S. government claims has resolved very quickly after the strikes that there was only 3. That is a fairly strong piece of evidence that their missiles were shot down.
Right.
Why would
you
think, deny, especially military targets? Why would you leave those out? They'd be the most important ones in terms of public opinion to justify the attack. If there's any people quibbling over the morality of it, surely you'd want to include as many military, Syrian government, gassing its own people, Syrian military, blah 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 blah. You'd want to, even from a purely kind of logical or practical or rules of war point of view, you'd want to emphasize the fact that you targeted military installations.
Not a university.
Not a freaking university. But yet they say, they said, what, 76% of 105 or something? It's like almost 75%. It's like 70% of all of the missiles they fired, they're saying, landed on a university.
Yeah.
No, they're not saying it in those words, but that's what happened. They're calling it a chemical weapons lab. But go and look it up for yourself. It's nonsense.
Well, 2 things on that. One, that makes me this is just some speculation, but I'm wondering if maybe if there was a like a kind of gentleman's agreement between Russia and the U.S. about these strikes, if perhaps those three targets were the ones agreed upon, and if the Americans, French, and British tried to sneak in a bunch of other targets
No
outside
doubt.
of the agreement,
I mean, I
and
would say
then
I wouldn't necessarily
so
no doubt, but I would
basically,
say that's very plausible theory
Mhm,
because you can. I mean, these people are not trustworthy. You can't
mhm,
trust them as far as you can throw them, basically. So, definitely, I would say that there was some. I mean, I would say that there's a high likelihood that there was an agreement made or some information given, um, and I think the
mhm,
information that was given wasn't so much that. Um, the US told the Russians where necessarily they were going to target, or maybe in general terms, but rather that the Russians told the US where they couldn't, in the sense of they
mhm,
told the US where Russian military personnel were stationed. And I'm
mhm,
assuming I'm giving the US a little bit of kind of um, leeway, I suppose, or giving them some credit in the sense that I would assume that they would not deliberately target, or they do not want to target Russian personnel or have
mhm,
any Russian casualties. But that doesn't stop them from sneakily trying to
mhm,
attack and kill Syrian military personnel
mhm,
or destroy Syrian military installations like airfields and military
mhm.
bases, which they obviously did target, and
Mm.
now have basically whitewashed that. They've removed that from the narrative that they actually targeted military installations. Why? Because they were all shot down.
Right, and it is curious that all those other targets, according to the Russians, so if the Russians are telling the truth about this, then all those other targets, they got all the cruise missiles and all the missiles that were fired at those targets, 100%.
Hmm.
So, um, so it's like it seems to me as if the missiles that did get through were maybe allowed through to at least to a large degree, and that when all those other targets were targeted, it's like, well, nope, sorry, it wasn't part of the agreement, so they just took all of those missiles out, which is like
Hmm.
a slap in the face. And um, well, that just makes me well, because if the Russian jamming technology was used as it's being alleged to have been used, then why not use it on all of the missiles, right? Presumably, I don't know the
Well,
specifics, but you'd think that maybe that would work, right? If you can jam several missiles, can you jam all of them? Um,
well, you're
s-
talking here about. I don't think you can. I don't think you can necessarily take down all missiles. It's 70% hit rate is extremely rare. It's actually stunning. It's a stunning
It's unheard
mhm,
of.
it's a stunning hit rate basically for taking down incoming projectiles, especially from America's nice new shiny smart whatever missiles. If you look back at, like I said, about in the first Gulf War with the Patriot missiles, those Patriot missiles were trying to take down Scud missiles, which were just ballistic missiles. They're not guided or anything. They're just lobbed up into the air, and they come down in a
mhm,
parabolic trajectory. Um, and they weren't even able to. They got the Israelis claimed, and the Israelis were interested at the time because they were being fired at Israel. The Israelis claimed officially that about they said 2%. Two
mhm,
percent is like being generous, basically.
yep,
So it's very difficult to shoot down incoming missiles. Certainly, it was 20 or 30 years ago. But so the idea that 70% of them were shot down is really amazing. But yeah, I don't
well, but
think
then,
I don't think it's possible to
but
shoot them all down. It's not unless I mean, obviously, in a certain situation or a certain configuration, you could, in theory, shoot down all missiles, but you'd have to have a serious amount of hardware they're tracking and taking care of a large number of missiles. And of course, the number that you shoot down would become less uh, uh, in relation to the number of systems you have trying to shoot them down. If you, I mean, imagine the US fired 800 cruise missiles at Syria.
mhm. Well,
Um,
yeah, but this
they
is
can
this is
maybe they
kind of
can
my
take down
point.
if they've got enough systems, they can take down 70%. Yes, but what's 30% of 800 is still a lot of missiles.
Mhm. Well, that's kind of my point, though. That makes me um, think that additional systems were used, like some top of the line electronic warfare jamming equipment, because just traditional anti-air anti-missile defense, like where you actually shoot a missile up at that missile, that like you're saying, those don't have a very good track record. And you'd think that even with upgrades, yeah, it would be pretty low,
Mm.
just using those traditional means. But if you look at all those other air bases targeted, it was like if you just separate those out, it was 100% of those missiles, like at those locations, were knocked down or
Mm.
otherwise, diverted. Right? It
Mhm.
was, and at the Barza, university, research facility, the number was much lower. It was only like, well, how many did they say get? It was something like 5 out of 30 that they knocked out,
Yeah, 9
which
or
is
so
really
out of
low.
30. Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
They didn't expect it there.
So,
It's not a
well,
military
no,
target.
oh,
maybe,
maybe.
maybe.
The university.
Um,
But just
this is
one more
interesting.
thing on that
Go on,
university,
yeah.
just to, I wanted to bring this up earlier, but this Barza facility, I want to read something. This is from an OPCW report, and it should be clear, as I read it, what the details are. So, in accordance with paragraph 11 of Council Decision EC-38, etc., the second round of inspections at the Barza and Jamaraya facilities of the SSRC was concluded on 22nd November 2017. The results of the inspections were reported as an addendum dated 28th February 2018 to the report entitled Status of the Implementation of Executive Council Decision EC 83 blah blah blah.
Mm.
The analysis of samples taken during the inspections did not indicate the presence of scheduled chemicals in the samples, and the inspection team did not observe any activities inconsistent with obligations under the convention during the second round of inspections at the Barza and Jamraya facilities. So
Mhm.
basically, it looks like that this research facility university was used in the past, or at least accused of being part of the Syria's previous chemical weapons program, but it has specifically been part of the OPCW convention, requirements of
Mhm.
inspections carried out. And the last inspection was carried out just in November of last year, and the
Mhm.
report issued in February. So the OPCW checked out this exact facility just 4 months ago, 5 months ago,
Well,
and gave it
I
a
wouldn't,
clear bill of health.
I wouldn't jump to the conclusion that because they looked at that facility, that it was necessarily involved in any purported Syrian chemical weapons program.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But why would anybody do that? Of course, there's probably. I mean, put it this way: if, for example, the UK had been turned into well, it is a pariah state, but if it was officially a pariah state, a rogue regime basically pursuing chemical weapons allegedly, and the whole international community was against them and wanted to decapitate Theresa May. Be still my beating heart. Anyway, they certainly there's probably dozens and dozens of universities and research institutions across the UK that would come under the
Yeah.
purview of any organization looking into what they might be doing. Any lab anywhere, basically, in a university, a private or public lab, would be subject to scrutiny, right? That means, and I don't know if you had like, if it became known that you were living in the UK and you were throwing some like chlorine and I don't know, detergent or something in your bathtub, you might get a visit as well, and you might be named as being involved in the British chemical weapons program. Uh, so it's ridiculous. Obviously, it's. I mean,
Mhm.
there's no way to. I mean, I understand it's difficult for those organizations when they go into a country and they're meant to inspect possible sites. Of course, there's a long list of possible sites. What's a possible site for chemical weapons development? Well, anywhere where there's like test tubes and people in white coats, and they have bought some various different components for some unspecified reason. Well, yeah, maybe
Yeah.
they're developing chemical weapons. Didn't they say about Novichok, quote unquote Novichok, that you can if you have the right ingredients and you can make it in your bathtub, you can make it. Anybody can make it at home. I think it was Craig Murray mentioned that the person he was talking to in the British government or in the Commonwealth Office or something, Foreign and Commonwealth Office, that told him that, or no, somebody had talked to in the US. Anyway, he got some information from someone who was in a position to know, maybe someone in MIT or something like that, who said that his undergraduate students, his best undergraduate students, could produce Novichok.
Right.
So the whole topic
The
of
whole
chemical
conversation
weapons
is just nuts from the
pure
beginning.
nonsense.
But it is
It's a
interesting that
trope, you know.
in the specific accusation against this specific target, it has been specifically verified as not having any chemical
Right.
weapons whatsoever to do
Right.
with it.
So they blow it up. Yeah.
And just a month beforehand, it's signed off, OPCW stamped,
Yeah.
you know. It's amazing. Like the lies upon the lies, and each one, there's plenty of proof to show it to be so. It's another, it adds another layer to it. I mean, the biggest layer with respect to the OPCW and its involvement in Syria is that they came in 2013 because, remember, Putin intervenes, guarantees a deal between the Syrian government, signed and approved. OPCW inspectors can come in and do whatever they want, look wherever they want. They verified the country has the government, the military forces of the Syrian state has no access to any stockpiles of chemical weapons. Signed off in early 2014, stamped, approved, OPCW, bam. That's it. That should have been the end of it. And
we fired chemical weapons because they must have kept some. Oh really? Do you have any evidence for that? No.
Babies,
crying babies.
social media.
23rd of June 2014 tweet from the Department of State to John Kerry, and I quote, "Today, the last 8% of declared chemical weapons were removed from #Syria. Great work done by all involved."
Oh, right. That's exactly it. Because at the time, they wanted to own that process, even though it was bloody Russia's doing it. Putin should have got the Nobel Peace Prize for preventing the obliteration of Syria in 2013. But they said, the Obama government passed it off as their diplomatic success.
Yes. We put the pressure on.
Unbelievable.
We threatened to invade them as they did. And then at the last minute, we got them to remove their chemical weapons, and it was all good. And yeah, by basically, that was October 2013. So by June 2014, 9 months later, done. Official statement by the Department of State to John Kerry. Excellent. Last 8% gone. No more chemical weapons in Syria. Today, lob 100 cruise missiles because, they must have got some from somewhere because the White Helmet said that they were crying babies. You know? Don't you hear the crying babies? Can't you hear them? If you're just quiet enough for long enough, you can hear the crying babies.
That was Nikki Haley's literal case to the UN emergency meeting last week prior to the airstrikes.
Don't you say that, Nikki. Don't say Nikki Haley again, or I'll have to beat something with this fish.
Do we even want to listen to the clip of her
Go on.
making the legal case for blowing up Syria?
Go on. I don't feel like dinner anyway, so.
Chemical weapons have once again been used. Babies lying dead next to their mothers. I could hold up pictures of survivors. Children with burning eyes, choking for breath. After all, no civilized government would have anything to do with Assad's murderous regime. Pictures of dead children mean little to governments like Russia. The Russian regime, whose hands are all covered in the blood of Syrian children, cannot be ashamed by pictures of its victims. The United States is determined to see the monster who dropped chemical weapons on the Syrian people held to account. Either way, the United States will respond.
Oh, she needs the fish.
Go make me a Waffle House, Nikki.
Babies, dead children.
Babies, dead children.
Russian hands, blood,
Nails.
Assad monster.
Nails on chalkboard. Chocolate and fried eggs.
Survivors.
Stubbing your toe on the cupboard. These are all terrible things. Think about them. Think about them long and hard. Feel that bad feeling. And now listen to me say Russia. Put the bad feelings that I have just encouraged you to feel together with the word Russia. What is the result? You don't like Russia. Okay, we agree. Can we have your support to bomb them? Thank you. Don't call us, we'll call you for the next installment of Babies. Nails on a chalkboard. Not nice things. Things you don't like. Things that make you mad. Scary things. Babies. Gasping for babies. Rotten fish. I don't know. Nasty
Which, by the
things.
way, it's already been exposed, the ruse of Douma,
Right.
which is that the footage of people
All right. The
choking.
one video that they're using,
One
the
video.
one video that they're using, the US government is using as evidence, apart from saying we saw stuff on social media. That's literally what they said. We saw stuff on social media. That's one of their sources of evidence. But the main evidence that they're shoving in people's faces is babies crying in video, getting doused with water. Look at the video. Aren't you horrified? Well, you know what? Russia, and I think it was Russia, yeah, basically Russia, RT, Sputnik, whatever, in Damascus, in Ghouta, in this area, got two of the guys that are clearly visible in that video and asked them what happened. And they said, yes, jihadis launched a mortar attack on a building. It kind of collapsed, set on fire. People in that building taken to hospital with smoke inhalation. That's why you see some respirators on people's faces. Also, he explained that the dousing with water was that someone ran in, probably a white helmet, and said, it was a chemical attack. And everybody freaked out because they thought they might be exposed to chemicals. So non-medical personnel then started dousing their family members or whoever with water. That's all you see in that video. And that's the basis of Assad used chemical weapons against his people.
It's so untethered from reality. And yet it's predictable from them. But here's where it gets even. So they launched the airstrikes anyway. They're back at the UN Security Council meeting, another one. I think it's announced today or yesterday. I'm not sure. Britain, France, and the US are apparently trying to convince Russia to get behind a new UN resolution that would approve these airstrikes in retrospect. Do they believe it or not? I don't know. They're pleading with the Russian government to look. All right, you've had a good run of it. Just let go of Assad. Come back to our side. Seriously, that's the current diplomatic statements anyway at the UN.
Right. Yeah.
It's so weird. It's
just bizarre. Anyway, we'll take a call here from Stephen. Stephen.
Yes.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. Thank you. I appreciate y'all's show. Just listening to Nikki Haley and just thinking about the whole scenario, what's happened, I've come to the conclusion that Nikki Haley believes absolutely nothing. Zero of what she said. Zero. She wouldn't have. We're a very dumb people. We can be a very dumb people in general, en masse. But somebody doesn't rise up to become a governor of a U.S. state by being just that dumb that she would believe anything that she said in front of that she's been saying in front of the UN. I just cannot. I cannot believe that.
Right.
You follow me?
Yeah, but how does someone like that? Can you imagine standing up in front of the world and telling blatant lies and knowing that they're lies?
Yeah. Well, this is in my opinion looking.
How does she justify it to herself?
Yeah. Well, she just looking at it from a broader context. In my interpretation, that the war machine, the people that make weapons, it's a way of just feeding the oligarchy in the United States and imperialism, and it's so entrenched that that's why we're seeing a type of propaganda at this moment that is infecting and has affected the left of the spectrum. Because if you're going to be somebody like Amy Goodman, Glenn Greenwald, Glenn Greenwald actually made a statement that he believed that the Syrian government has been behind not only this last supposed chemical attack but others. Right? That's mendacious and that's lying. I also believe that Glenn Greenwald knows that the reality is it is most likely the rebels who had the incentive, the motivation, and the means to stage either real or fake chemical attacks. And
Right.
we haven't even seen any evidence that there is even a chemical attack that happened, right?
Right.
So this is and to me, I kind of break this down as simple as I can, because that's all I can wrap my mind around. Why would Glenn Greenwald say this? Money. He's a multi-millionaire through the help of Pierre Omidyar, who was giving money to help overthrow the government of Ukraine for U.S. Imperialist interests. He was part of funding groups, supposed NGOs. That's Omidyar.
Mhm.
That's who helps fund the Intercept. The Intercept's coverage of Syria since its inception has been horrible, has been horrid. And so Glenn Greenwald is a sellout. He'll say a lot of things that you nod your head with and you agree with, as far as civil liberties, the rights, but then on certain crucial issues, he'll fucking distort and partake in this pattern of imperialism, which always has a demonization of an individual into a gargantuan villain. And they just pound it into our heads time and time again, and it seems to work like a charm. Amy Goodman, Democracy Now!, follow the money. She's a multi-millionaire now for being aligned with foundations that are connected to the arms manufacturers, the oligarch class, and so forth. So I don't even give credence to that. These talking heads on TV believe really what they're saying. They're playing their roles. They're becoming millionaires, and they're just that cynical to know what their job is and to do it dutifully.
Probably.
What did you make of Tucker Carlson's monologue on it last week?
Yeah, well, I put him in the same category as the media whores, but he does seem to want to have some integrity. So they allow Tucker to have these dissident views on Fox, because that also gives Fox some credibility as like not being totally right-wing neocon. So, but I do pat him on the back for speaking out forcefully in helping people become a little bit more skeptical about what's going on. I think that was important. But I think that if that wasn't part of Tucker Carlson's accepted role within Fox, he would have been booted off the air, and that segment never would have been aired. You follow me?
Right. Yeah. It's interesting that it's allowed. Yeah.
Yeah. Follow the money. I think everything comes down to follow the money. Why are people, why are the more money you have in general, the more financial security you have, the easier it is for you to back any status quo arrangement of power within a society. And this is true across the globe. So like, it's no surprise that when middle-class people, are fat, dumb, and happy here, they're making a couple $100,000 a year. They have retirement accounts. They have soccer practice. They're engaged in all other activities outside of work. So they get a little news blurb here and there, and then all of a sudden they come to the opinion that Assad's a demon. And this says something really interesting about our culture. Even though we have all these universities and education, we just don't educate people to think critically.
Right.
And that's an effect of how power, social classes and relations of power impact our educational system. Critical thinking is a very fascinating subject, and it's a useful exercise of your mental capacities. And if we were going to have any kind of society where people actually have a say in how things go, some semblance of democratic component to a system, you would think that we would want real educated voters that can think critically. Our society does not produce that, and I would say it's probably goes for most societies in the world. So even I think it's across the board, and it's an effect of power on how things, how people are matriculated through a system and educated and so forth. But our habits of stupidity within England and the United States, it seems like it seems like maybe it's hard for me I haven't thought about it deeply, but it's though the population really isn't as dumb. They're getting smarter because people do question the official narrative, and they have the internet to get alternative views fairly easily. That's a big difference between now and say 30 years ago. But at the same time, the people with power have a more sophisticated means of filtering out dissident views from reaching the majority of the population, even though we have this incredible technological evolution through the internet, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
I think that as far as Trump goes on this whole thing, I think that the guy's just not that bright in many areas. He's very bright when it comes to business and making money and knowing how to present himself as a celebrity figure. He's bright in that regard. And he's cynical enough to play people in business and get ahead. And that's kind of the American way. He's the top dog, but he's really not that bright when it comes to history, when it comes to global affairs. So he's surrounded, even though he probably does genuinely think it would be better to have good relations with Russia. He's got a situation where the United States is losing its imperial status. So they have to use Syria as kind of a linchpin. So it seems to me, if I were just to guess what's going to happen in the future, the long term, is the United States will try to set up a permanent place inside of that area of Syria that they have control and entrench it. And that's the only way they can stop a block of Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon from developing that would counter the puppet regimes of Saudis, and Israel plays a role in that too. So this is a linchpin event situation for the US, the neocon thinkers, the deep state, the types that have no problem snuffing out people using humanitarian excuses to maintain US global hegemony. So what they're going to do in Syria, I think, is try to set up something permanent there. And then the question is, what's going to happen with Russia? Will Russia ever be forced into a situation? I think Russia would actually support a long-term status quo where the United States has cut off a section of Syria, and it will not attack the United States and try to destroy their hold on that region. But there's going to be the danger is that there's going to be a lines crossed where too many innocent, I would say innocent Russian soldiers or Russian personnel are killed by US violence inside Syria, that Russia has to act militarily and shoot at American US proxies or army personnel or aircraft, and that's the real danger. But and who knows how that could play out. So that's kind of my take on the situation right now.
All right, Stephen. Thanks for
Okay.
calling.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Stephen. See ya. There's one country that's conspicuous by its absence in FUKUS, or FUKUS. Pardon my Francais.
Focus.
I mean, it's the old alliance. It's been
Focus
the
on
old
Israel.
alliance since World War One, actually. The US,
Well, look-
France, and the UK.
If you talk about the Skripal business,
Ooh, yeah, we should
Who-
talk about that.
we shouldn't talk about that. Why? No, we talked about it already. We talked about that enough. I just want to say one thing about it, and it's that it echoes what Craig Murray, former US ambassador, British ambassador to Uzbekistan, said on his blog a few weeks ago.
As soon as it happened.
Pretty much as soon as it happened, he said, there's plenty of people who have motivation to set Russia up in this way, to try and drop this on the UK and set up Russia. And he mentioned the Israelis and Mossad. And at the time I went, yeah, that's actually pretty close to what I was thinking myself. unless the British did it. But there was an element of the Skripal business where they didn't know really what they were doing, and they got it all a bit.
They were
got a
so
bit,
clumsy.
They got a bit flustered about the whole thing.
Yeah.
They didn't know how to handle it. They didn't handle it in a way that it was that they understood, or they had a pre-plan or a plan developed to follow immediately after. They were simply reacting with outrage type of thing, and going with the official hate Russia script. So it seems somebody dropped that on the British, dumped it in their laps kind of thing, and said, what are you going to do with that? You know, and that's the kind of thing that the Israeli Mossad kind of do, you know. The Israelis, and the reason the Israelis would do that, knowing that they would end up it would end up in a demonization, a further demonization or smear campaign against Russia, that it was effectively an attack on Russia, not on the UK. The reason the Israelis would do that is because Russia is a big problem for Israel. But Russia plays this kind of nicey game where they have proper nice relationships with Russia, and they have dialogue with each other, or they scratch each other's back type of thing. They don't offend each other, and everything's okay officially. But behind the scenes, Israel sees Russia as a serious threat to its existence, effectively, because it's through Russian support or influence or power in the Middle East that is. It's through that Iran is being emboldened and strengthened, along with Lebanese Hezbollah and obviously the Syrian government. And those three, Lebanon, Hezbollah, the Syrian government, and Iran, are long-term enemies, hated by the Israelis. The Israelis have never shut up about those three countries for most of their existence, basically. You know what I mean? And for Russia to come in and empower them is like a red rag to a bull kind of thing for the Israelis. But the Israelis don't rock the boat with Russia officially, not in the international stage, that kind of stuff. They're not screaming like the UK and the US or about anti-Russian sentiment. They're not fully engaging or even partially engaging in this anti-Russian smear campaign. But behind the scenes, they're actually providing the raw material in their own way and where they can for that smear campaign. Without any, I mean, that's, if you wanted to achieve your objectives, surely it's like by deception, right? That's the Mossad's motto, by way of deception. If you want to achieve your objectives, then if you're of that kind of mindset, the way you want to do it is to incite other people into conflict with your enemy, provoke your friends to hate your enemies, while you, to some extent, get away cleanly. Of course, Israel has made it clear that it doesn't like Syria, and it's been bombing in Syria and all that kind of stuff.
Well, at least a dozen times.
Yeah,
they just
get away with
it. They don't set up a false flag, ginny up a media campaign, make sure the UN Security Council's got its back, and then say, "Oh, we're going in." No, they just
go ahead and do
it's in the newspaper the next day. There were airstrikes last night for the 13th time in the last 10 months. They just go in and blow up whatever they want,
right?
And it's having real consequences. When I was looking for footage of missiles being launched by the Syrian forces in response to the incoming US Tomahawks, I found a ton of videos that I hadn't seen before, going back over the last 2 years, of their Syrian defense systems retaliating, and you can hear the jets overhead.
Mm-hmm.
They're retaliating, they're trying to hit the Israelis. They finally succeeded in doing that just last month, which was kind of buried by all this other news about Skripal, and obviously this situation now.
Mm-hmm.
The Israelis had a jet shot down by the Syrians. They were at war nonstop, but it's like the world media has tacitly agreed not to cover that war. Right. That's a sub-war, and it's taking place in isolation over here.
Right.
But of course, US versus Russia headlines. Well, everyone gets to hear about it.
There's an interesting detail on that score, and it's that a statement by the Russian government that in response to the cruise missile attack on Syria just a couple of days ago, they said that they had, at the request of their foreign partners, the US and Europe and Israel, they had stopped any plans to sell S-300 anti air defense systems to give them to Syria. But now, after this attack, they would be revisiting that possibility, i.e. they may give to the Syrians S-300 systems. Now, the important thing about S-300s is that they're not for S-300s can shoot down Tomahawk cruise missiles, but it's massive overkill. That's not what they're for. They're for shooting down planes, and shooting down planes very effectively, to the point where no one will dare to fly over an airspace that's covered by an S-300 system. And that was a message to Israel,
Okay.
because Syria doesn't have that capability. And that's why Israel has been able to bomb almost with impunity until recently. Okay, that one almost got back to Israel before it crashed inside Israel, you
Yeah.
notice, but they would not be able to do that anymore if Russia were to give the Syrians that kind of a system, so that's kind of interesting, because that message wasn't really towards the US, because in a certain sense, the Russia already protects Syrian airspace, at least the Syrian territory, that the airspace over the territory that's controlled by the Syrian government, which is a good part of the country. That's more or less protected by Syrian air defenses, and it's understood that the US cannot and should not attack the Syrian military. So there's no real need for the Syrian military to protect itself against coalition, let's say US or UK or FUKUS, basically, airplanes, because they have decided that before now that they're not really able to do that. They're not going to attack the Syrian military because of Russian air defenses. But Israel has done so, so that message of possibly giving S-300 to Syria was really directed at Israel. In reference, basically, it was almost like a reference to Israel. You're the one who's been flying planes into Syria and bombing from your planes, bombing Syrian targets.
They say it's to target and hit Iranians.
They can say it's a target and hit the Barney, the freaking purple
But
dinosaur.
there is some reality.
Of course,
it's
there's
a
reality,
growing
but
reality that they're creating, that Iranians are there.
But they're there
obviously, to deal with
anyway,
that.
And this is an existential crisis for Israel. It's an existential crisis for Israel.
They're next door now.
And for Saudi Arabia,
Right.
Saudi Arabia and Israel stand to be ousted from the Middle East, basically, at least in terms of the hierarchy of them being the top dog. Saudi Arabia has all the oil. Israel has all the whatever is chutzpah, I don't know, whatever it has, that keeps it like, this little tiny little country that should be way down the list of countries in the world because it's got such a small population, no real resources. It shouldn't be very significant at all. But
it has the Jesus legacy.
Because Israel, right? So they're in terms of the power plays, the power dynamics in the Middle East, Israel and Saudi Arabia are facing it's not an existential crisis. It's more like a greedy bastards crisis, in the sense that they want it all, and they're being threatened with not being allowed to get it all, or not being top dog anymore. And that's a natural order, because you look at Iran. Israel has 5-6 million people. Depends if you include the Palestinians or not, because I'm not sure they're people according to the Israelis. But anyway, Israel, there's a few million Jews in Israel. Tiny little country. Iran, with no resources really. Iran, some of the biggest gas and oil resources in the world. 80 million people, just over there, other side of Syria and Iraq. Iraq, the same, less population but lots of resources. Syria, lots of resources. If there was some normalized standard of hierarchy in the Middle East based on resources, Iran would be at the top. Saudi Arabia would have to play ball with them, and Iraq and Syria would be up there as well. But no, apparently it's like an inverted pyramid, the smallest one. Well, the smallest one is at the top, really, when it shouldn't be there. So that's their problem, and that's why they don't like Russia, because of what Russia's doing. But Russia seems to be playing a game, really. With at the same time, they seem to be trying to keep the Israelis on side, to not antagonize them, to give them assurances, basically. But it's getting to the point where, put it this way, I don't think Russia doesn't necessarily want Iran to run rampant across the Middle East and to dominate it. Like Iran would like to, but Russia doesn't necessarily want that. Russia wants a kind of, however conceives it, but a kind of balance of power where people at least get on and aren't killing each other and fighting each other, you know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily it's not stuck on the idea that Iran should have bases all across Syria, that it should effectively colonize Syria. I don't think Russia even thinks that's a good idea. So it's not necessarily facilitating this push, and that's what gives us some leverage with the Israelis, where it genuinely doesn't want to see Iran.
Well, Russia has practically announced now, look, the US can't stop them, but we can stop the Iranians from getting too far.
Right.
You sort of saying you have to switch to us, given that we're now the dominant player here.
Yeah, there's a very complicated process.
But it's in transition, so it's back and forth.
Right.
It's not quite clear that Russia has the dominance yet. Like Stephen McCullough said, they did basically just carve out a chunk of northeast Syria. They are
Right.
still there, the American troops.
Yeah.
Are they there for the long haul? They just announced it again yesterday. Yes, we are. We're there for the long haul.
Yeah.
So
Something else they announced is, surprise, surprise, Nikki Haley, more sanctions coming soon for Russia.
Whatever.
For being naughty.
whatever.
But of course, the Russian government just made a little statement there recently saying that they have more than enough resources to deal with any pressure that Russia has adequate response to any kind of US pressure that can be exerted,
Well,
according to the Russian Foreign Ministry.
on Friday, a Pentagon, I think spokeswoman, after a general reassured White House press reporters that the mission was spectacular success, 100% success. We bombed exactly what we wanted to do. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
He gave the floor. No, he was interrupted by a female spokeswoman for the Pentagon, Dana White, I think her name is. Let's have a listen.
Dana White. What's her name again? Or what's her handle? She's the US ambassador to the UN, is that it? No, UK ambassador, I mean. UK
No, that's Karen Price. No, what?
Pentagon Spock's Russia troops.
Box, yeah, that's the one.
The last part of your question, I can't help you with what the Syrians are saying or not saying, but I'm telling you it's what actually happened.
And on that point, as Secretary Mattis said last night, the Russian disinformation campaign has already begun. There has been a 2,000% increase in Russian trolls in the last 24 hours. Therefore, we will keep you all abreast of the facts moving forward. Thank you all very much.
A 2,000% in Russia. She didn't say where they were. Does that mean there's real Russian trolls like under bridges and stuff? 2,000% increase in Russian trolls in the past 24 hours. Where? I mean, in the White House
In
or
America.
In America,
Yeah.
running around the streets.
I believe
Like
so.
biting
no,
people?
in the internet. You see, it's a hybrid war, Joe. Let me explain the concept of a hybrid war.
Go on.
So Russia has many tentacles, right?
Yeah.
And it's all up in your internets. So whenever there's a war like this, they respond asymmetrically, see?
Yes.
And they do it by
Saying
unleashing
stuff
trolls on
By
the internet.
saying stuff on the internet.
And they had a 2,000% increase in their cyber genetic warfare.
So should people stop up their ears or something like that? Stop up their internets?
No, they should never believe anything they see on social media, except when we say
that is
social media
true.
was awesome
Right.
to justify the Douma chemical weapons attack. But no, otherwise, social media is fake news. That's why we have Zuckerberg up this week.
Right.
We're grilling him about fake news and social media. Of course, he's saying, yes, it's a Cold War with Russia, and we're fighting the war for you guys.
Yeah. What about this lady, the UK ambassador? She's lovely,
Oh.
lovely specimen. UK ambassador to the UN. What's her name? I don't know what her name is. I don't
Karen
really care.
Pierce.
Karen.
She's new since January. She replaced the previous guy, Rycroft.
Yeah, she had something to. She had some serious words for the Russians. This UK ambassador to the UN. She schooled them. No, big time.
Yeah.
Let's hear.
In respect of Karl Marx, I think he must be turning in his grave to see what the country that was founded on many of his precepts is doing in the name of supporting Syria by condoning the use of CW on Syrian territory.
That's a very good point because it's well known, not a very well known point, but it's a very important point, like overlooked aspect of Karl Marx's theories, including is that he was
Including Das Chemicals.
he was dead set against the chemical weapons. He said that it was the one way to alienate the proletariat to ruin
The
any
working
chance
class.
to alienate the proletariat, the working class, was to use chemical weapons in any form, and that you would only embolden the bourgeoisie and the capitalist class by using chemical weapons, particularly in the Middle East, and particularly if Russia was to do that. I think she said that Karl Marx said that Russia would bring on its own destruction if it was to allow the use of chemical weapons in the Middle East in 2018.
It's awful, isn't it? I mean, what did Karl Marx go and found Russia for?
I know.
And to see what happened to his
Yeah.
creature that he created. Look at it
I know.
today. Look at it's awful.
I know. I mean, well, that's another lesser known fact that Karl Marx founded Russia, or founded the Soviet Union. So, I mean, that's the quality of person you have at the UN representing the UK. So, what do you expect? You know, this is the person that the British government decided to represent them on the world stage at the UN. She is, you know,
I think she's Boris Johnson's cousin.
well, she's got to be genetically related somehow to that.
I made that up.
that
She might as well be.
But seriously, like, I mean, that just says it all. How can you believe? I mean, that's the quality of person that is presented, the quality of intellect, basically, that's presented to represent the UK. And obviously, the people who picked her to do that are no better because, you know,
Right.
one idiot picks another. One bullshit artist picks another, you know.
It's classic polarization, right?
Yeah.
The downward selection.
Right.
A certain mindset gets in and they pick people of the right mind, but they don't understand that to normal people, they're just completely gaffe prone.
Yeah.
Without
And-
conscience.
And they don't know that they're, the worst thing is they don't realize that
Dunning-Kruger
that they're
effect,
letting,
they can't see. She said that. And I bet she was so proud of
Sure,
herself.
she-
I bet she left that room going, I really showed those Russians. And the whole world's watching it just jaw on the floor, you know.
Karl
You're so
Marx.
wrong. You're not even wrong, sweetheart.
Karl Marx, the founder of Russia, is turning in his grave because Russia likes chemical weapons. Parallels are clear, everybody. The whole world needs to hear this.
What does she think? So
Karl Marx and das Chemical. What?
it was supposed to shame the Russian ambassador.
Yeah.
Feel again, appeal to the emotions.
Your
feel the
mother's
shame. This is shame. Feel it.
It's like saying your mother's turn. It's like
Now
Jesus,
do what I say.
Yeah.
What?
your mother's turning in her grave. If she could see you now, she'd be horrified. She must be turning in her grave. She that gave birth. I mean, Karl Marx gave birth to Russia, and look what Russia's doing. Has it no shame? You know, the last thing on his deathbed, Karl Marx said, "Whatever you do, don't use the chemical weapons." My beloved Russia that I birthed. And what does Russia do? Use the chemical weapons in flagrant violation of Karl Marx, the Russian founder's last dying words. I even wrote a book on it, like you said. Das Chemical. Anyway, yeah, wonderful. That's just wonderful. I don't know. What do? You just walk away. See you later. You know, because you're all nuts. You're all talking nonsense, and I'm tired pointing out your BS, your flagrant BS, the big stinking pile. It keeps piling up there. I'm tired pointing it out to all the people, anybody who's listening. I'm kind of tired pointing it out because you know what? It stinks to high heaven, and everybody with a working nose should be able to smell it by now.
Is this how this is going to go now from here on out? Every week we get on here and they do another false flag and use it to do something atrocious or risky or whatever. And we have to like point out why it's wrong.
Yeah. But here's why the obvious setup, the obvious lie that, you know, it's like, you know, the sky is green. We have to go and say, well, you see, the Pentagon the other day said that the sky was green. And there's a problem with that story. Here we've got a flip chart here. We're going to do a PowerPoint presentation on why it's not green. and why this is just an underhanded attempt to screw over Russia. Yeah, by convincing the world that something is the way it isn't. No, I don't know. Yeah, that's what we're faced into. Although, you know, I don't know. Yeah, that's what it's going to be. Basically, yes. But it's going to get worse because these people are going to be. They're going to be
making more mistakes.
More mistakes are going to be more obvious, more egregious, more flagrant. Kind of like lies will be told, and
worse, they're going to become more confident in the lies they tell. Maybe that's the side effect. They like Karen Pierce just there.
Right.
She will say something even more
right with more enthusiasm and more conviction. They'll be like, "Yes, this is what it is." I mean, they'll say stuff that is obviously not true or that is so beyond the realm of likelihood or possibility that the average person should go. They should laugh, but they're not laughing because they're shocked that someone would try and pass off such a pile of bullshit on them as serious, and you expect the person to break out laughing and say, "Only joking. Of course, there's no chemical weapons." Or, of course, Assad wouldn't use chemical weapons. We're only joking to saying that he used chemical weapons. You're waiting for them to say that, and then they don't say it, and you go, "Hang on, you're serious?"
They're serious.
And then so it kind of like freezes your brain. You don't know what
Yeah.
to do, and you just want, like I say, you just want to get a large fish out and slap them off the stage, basically, like knock them off the podium and say, "Okay, next, can we have a sensible person who'll say something, more in line with reality?" But there's no hope. I don't know. They seem to be pushing the tard, like the idiots, the complete buffoons, the brain dead people. They seem to be pushing them into the limelight and say, you say something now, you say something authoritative, and the Three Stooges or something, or I don't know, get up there, say whoop 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 and slap their face. Russia, slap whoop whoop, Russia's evil. That's all I have for you today. Anyway,
Slap. That was another thing Nikki Haley said recently. Literally. said it.
I'm going to slap Russia.
Well, we will
Slap
never be
herself.
friends with Russia, but we will always be there to slap them down.
Yeah, but she should slap herself. Is the thing, If she had any sense, she'd give herself a good slap. Anyway, I think we've talked enough about slapping this show. No.
Yeah.
I'll in
slap
fact,
down.
I think we've pretty much talked that topic out. There'll be more stuff that we have to deal with. I mean, like we said earlier on the show, the U.S. aircraft carrier Truman, the guy who dropped the bombs. Didn't he drop the bombs? He sanctioned the dropping of the bombs.
I think the USS Truman was part of the ruse,
No, Truman president.
right? But
He was dropper.
he dropped the
Big-
nukes.
big-
Yeah.
So maybe
Well, he was a pencil pusher from
was a pencil
Missouri. He
pusher,
didn't
but-
do anything. But yeah,
still, he was president at the time. So maybe it's USS Truman is a word to the wise, kind of like nudge nudge, wink wink. USS Truman. Nukes. We're going to use
right.
nukes in
Well,
Syria.
the other USS was the Winston Churchill.
Well,
That's a
he used
guy.
chemical
There's a
weapons.
guy who dropped chemical weapons
On
in
Iraq.
British airstrikes on Iraq and other places, I think, or talked about
talked
it
about
doing
doing
in
it in
other
Ireland.
places. Talked about doing it in Ireland. And then they used it. I mean, is that a signal too? Maybe it is, but then
I don't know. No, it's not a signal. But I'm saying this ship, this aircraft carrier with a bunch of planes, obviously fighter jets and stuff, is coming in the next day or two to the Eastern Mediterranean. So are they going to do more? Are they going to have another? Are they going to try Shock and Awe Part 2 this time? This time they're super new and smart and shiny, super smart missiles.
well, Mattis said immediately after the airstrikes on Friday night, this is a one.
Yeah,
one
some
off.
other people were
Maybe it was
saying
just
maybe not, but you're getting conflicting information. It's very hard to figure out what's actually going on. We just have to wait and see and then analyze after the fact. And generally, we start out with a kind of preformed conclusion, which is these people are idiots. And that's
and
not,
then we
that's
wait
not,
for them to show us
right, but
that
that's not
our
biased.
conclusion is correct.
It's not
Okay.
biased. Once you investigate, you find out that it's true. I mean, you can set it up. You can have an a priori kind of assumption or a belief about something that's going to happen in the realm of geopolitics when America is involved, i.e., that they're full of shit because they have at this point such a long track record of being full of shit that it's going to be some flavor of shit, basically. You know what I mean? So what we do is on the show every week is we come and we present the particular flavor that has been presented this week. So that's what well, maybe we'll get some good flavors. You never know. It might be nice. Anyway, we're going to leave it there for this week, folks. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with another show. Until then, have a good evening.
See you next week. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye, everyone.